Okay, so very quickly again, my name is Wes Uehara. I'm here today to talk to you about summer undergraduate research internships, or specifically the National Science Foundation research experience for undergraduate programs. Okay, so we'll already sort of talked about making sure that you guys sign in, and I'm going to be giving you guys a bit of information on what this is all about, where you can find information on the individual sites and opportunities, how we as recruiters kind of look at the materials that you're going to submit with your application. And then at the later half, we're going to have some students talk to you guys about their experiences, and then for you to be able to ask some questions, okay? But just to give you an idea of what the REU program is the National Science Foundation is a federal agency that offers funding, right? In the traditional sense, it's typically for research, right? They fund labs across the country. And they realize an important thing of providing opportunities for younger students to get an idea of what research is, in the hope that they might actually pursue graduate school and then maybe continue working in with an academic lab, right? And there's a lot of really great outcome of the kind of research that's being done in labs across the country. And so there's a need to try to make sure that we continue to get a workforce that is interested in doing that, okay? So the federal agency is committed to diversifying the workforce and supporting that pipeline to graduate school. And so what happens is a professor or a principal investigator, PI, from one of these universities or national lab will submit a proposal to NSF saying, hey, this is the scope of work that we need help with, and we want to hire some undergraduate interns to come and help us to do this work, okay? And NSF reviews that proposal and then says, yes, I think this is a good idea. And then they give them money. And that money is to support students like you in these paid summer internships, okay? Now, because it's a federal agency, it is generally, it is only available for US citizens and permanent residents, okay? Now, there might be some of you who are international students, but I think, you know, you might want to stick around and hear what we have to say, because I'm also going to tell you about a search tool that you can use that sort of parses opportunities based on your citizenship status, okay? In addition to that, it's kind of helpful to hear a little bit about what I'm going to cover, because in any event, if you do apply to work in a lab, whether it be funded or not, you know, these are sort of the things that, you know, a faculty or a lab manager might be looking at in entertaining whether or not they would invite you to come, okay? Examples of NSF REU programs, I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a little bit, but you can see that, you know, there's research areas in a wide array of different applications. You can look at some of these titles and sort of deduce, you know, the kinds of skills or processes or coding languages or research, you know, sort of focuses and research areas that are included in the work that's done at each of these research sites. But it's super exciting because, you know, it's truly an opportunity for you as a student to take your skills and to apply them, you know, in trying to solve a novel problem, right? There's some pretty cool things here, but this is just a quick collection of some of the NSF REU programs across the country, okay? So NSF provides kind of a package deal. Effectively, they give some guidelines on what is allowable to provide to a student in this award, okay? And it varies from site to site. But give you an idea, it's about $4,000 to $5,000 of stipend, so you actually get paid to do this work. You know, certain sites will provide you housing, okay? Here at UCLA, that's a challenge because housing is quite costly. Generally, it provides you a little bit of expense budget for your travel to the site, and then it generally covers all the program costs, right? And there are some, right? And so like, you know, any workshops that you have or scaffolding activities, poster sessions that you're gonna do, the site generally picks up the costs for those kinds of things, okay? So it gives you an idea of what you could expect as an award for an REU program. And this is the beauty of it, right? Like, we're accustomed to doing research here at UCLA. It doesn't always come with funding, but this is a way to get some really great experience and get paid to do it. Okay, so application and eligibility. Again, this is going to vary from site to site. I already talked about the citizenship requirement. I think that generally sites are looking for students who are around the 3.0 GPA area. I don't know that, it sort of varies with the site with regard to whether or not they list sort of a base minimum, right, of a GPA or cutoff. I can tell you that, if you have a stronger GPA, obviously you're going to be more competitive. And part of that is the sort of hint of, faculty going, we want to make these kinds of opportunities to students who might have a chance at being competitive in the graduate school application process, okay? Generally speaking, you need to have an interest in research. And I'll go into that a little bit more. Interest in research means like interested in learning about research, right? Like you're not committing yourself to a lifetime of academic research or grad school or doctoral program, but you have to be interested in learning about research, okay? I'm going to go into this a little bit more also in another slide, but there are gateway experiences for our first and second year students, as well as capstone experiences. And that's why I'm so excited that there are some first year students who are joining us today. You do need to be full-time status currently as well as in the fall, okay? That's generally a requirement. And so effectively what this means is for all of our graduating seniors, you're no longer eligible, right, for this program. And we look at it just like in high school that you're moving on to the next step. And so these programs and experiences are for those who we have a chance at sort of, I guess influencing isn't the right word, but providing an experience that will help you to decide on what it is that you want to do post-graduation. Certainly having demonstratable skills and work experience, just like any other engineering opportunity, is definitely helpful. Those of you who are entertaining graduate school, again, this isn't, you're not signing the line, and like committing to graduate school, but you have to have an interest, in seeing what the grad school experience might be like, because that's what you're going to get, right, when you go to one of these REU sites. And then some sites have some very specific skill requirements, right? And so, for example, a few years ago, we hosted a site called Wireless Health Institute, and it sounds very medical, but the activities of the research was solely coding. And so, we had a number of applicants who were applying interested in going to medical school, which is great, but if you have no coding skills, you weren't going to be very competitive in our site, okay? So it's really important that you're paying attention to what the specific skills that each site is looking for, okay? So how do I find out about this internships? There's several ways. One great way is the pathways-to-science.org website. This is effectively a search tool that was created by the federal government, and they're doling out thousands of dollars to support these kinds of activities. They thought it'd be a good idea to have a centralized place for students to be able to find out about the different opportunities. And so they created the pathways-to-science.org website. What I like about this website is twofold. First, it has an advanced search feature on it. And then secondly, it provides a listing of opportunities based on your current status, right? And so you can see on the slide here, it might be too small, but there's a link for K-12, there's a link for undergraduates, there's a link for grad students, postdocs, faculty, admin. And so, for all of you at whatever level you are, it's a really great way to kind of forward think about different kinds of opportunities. And so, if you were interested in becoming a graduate student, you could look to the pathways-to-science.org website to see what kinds of opportunities there are there, right? So for example, NSF also had another grant program called the IGRT, which is a training grant that paid for grad school, right? And so those are some of the things that you can look to. So very quickly, in looking at this, to navigate, you would look at the summer research experience for undergraduates link, and then it brings you to this search tool, and you can search by discipline, by user group. There's even a link here, for community college students. There's a button you can press for opportunities for international students. You can search by institution. In their advanced search tools, you can search by keyword. And so if you were interested in embedded systems, you could click that icon and it will pull up all of the different opportunities in that area. Okay, so what I've done here is I did a quick search on things in biomedical engineering, and you can see that there are several different sites with links to the specific site itself and to learn a little bit more about that. okay? So to find out about these programs, you're going to need to do a little bit of investigation, okay, which I'll go into shortly. But before that, I also wanted to point out a couple of different ways you would find out about the RUs. You can go directly to the National Science Foundation website. If you just do Google Nsf Reu, it'll pull up this webpage, and then you can search by discipline, and it will pull up every funded site. And so that's another way for you to find out about different kinds of opportunities. And so the only thing with this NSF site is that like they don't have as savvy and advanced search tool as Pathways to Science, okay? And so for instance, here you're going to see all these disciplines, you know, ranging from atmospherical sciences, and you would probably, you know, want to start with the one that says engineering, right? And then sort of work your way out depending on what your interest areas are, okay? All right, and actually I'm racing through this because I want to make sure that we have time for our panelists. What I'd like to ask you to do is to make sure to jot down some of your questions, and I will try to address them at the end of the presentation, okay? So one other really great place to look for these opportunities is your very own undergraduate research program email blast, right? This comes out once a week. And so as a helpful reminder, please don't put this into your junk box. Make sure that you're looking through it to see if there's anything of interest to you before, you know, before you discard it. And there's REU site managers like Will, right? All over the country who's going to be sending solicitations to Will, okay? And so he's going to include this in the weekly email blast. And these are great because, you know that these people are looking specifically for UCLA engineering students. And there are some of these sites where we know the program manager, right? And so, for example, I believe that there was one that just came out this past week on from UC San Diego in looking at aquatic monitoring. And we know the PIs from that site, okay? And so if you needed to get or wanted to get more information about that site, we could help to make that happen, okay? So another great place to find out about research opportunities, okay? So how do you figure out what program to apply to? And that definitely, it's gonna take a little bit of time. And so, I would carve out, an hour here, maybe, a couple of hours here or there to, click some of these links to see what's interesting to you, okay? And it's like shopping, you're going to look around and there's going to be some things that seem, get you excited and want, make you want to learn more. And there's going to be a lot of stuff where you're like, that's not for me. But to think a little bit about some of the questions that you might want to try to answer as you're doing that, I've provided a list here, right? And so when you're investigating the research program, you're trying to get an understanding of what the research goal, and there, oftentimes what you're going to see is a very high level sort of mission statement that they're going to provide, right? And that's sort of for two reasons. First of all, they want, just like in marketing, they want to tell you about the cool things that they're doing. Cool meaning like, the things that they're developing and the impact that it could potentially have, right? And then the other reason is they may not be entirely sure the scope of work that you're going to be working on over the summer just yet, right? Because it's what, January now, and these programs aren't really going to start until May and June, right? So a lot of work can happen and things can change between then and now, okay? But in essence, you do want to get a feel for, what the research goal is and then what kind of work you're going to be doing, right? And there's several different mechanisms for you to do that. You can look at the faculty or the principal investigator, try to figure out what department they're coming from. That gives you a little bit of information, about a particular thing that can help you to identify whether or not you'd be a good fit or not, right? Find out what programs and what department the graduate students are from, right? In their information, right? Like what tools, processes, coding languages, skills, et cetera, are referenced, because those are likely the things that they're going to be looking for in an applicant, okay? which is sort of, in a broad scheme, what it is that you need to try to do, right? You have to figure out what is the specific skill that they're looking for in an intern, right? And a way to get a little bit more information is also to look at the projects completed by last year's interns, right? And so, there's usually a culminating event at the end of the summer where students are required to report back on the accomplishment of what they did or the results on what they did. And then there's usually at least an abstract list of what those projects are. And so that can give you a great idea of, the kind of work that's going on at the center. And then also sort of like, what you as an intern are going to be expected to be able to do, right? Okay, so, this information again can be on a program flyer, it can be on a program website. And then, you can also look at the faculty labs website and any publications that they may have produced. Okay, the sort of second tier of thing that I would recommend that you do is that is to reach out to someone from the site, right? So you can reach out to the faculty PI, or you can reach out to a program manager. And here are some of the questions that I would ask, right? What are the projects that the interns will be working on in this coming summer? Who are the faculty or the labs that will be hosting the interns? What specific skills do they want their interns to have? How many spots are available for the summer? Is there anything that you're hoping that I highlight in my application? Like, so, what would be helpful information to provide you in review of, my application for this position, right? Sometimes that's helpful if you can get any specific guidance from them, right? And then is there anything that I should know to better understand the work that I would be involved with, right? And so, the idea with this is you want to be able to speak intelligently, about the work that you're applying for, right? On the flip side, you definitely don't want to speak incorrectly of the work that you're applying for, right? And that's happened many times, right? I'll use the same example from the Wireless Health Institute, right? Every year we would have a number of students who are looking to apply for a medical program, and that's really not what our research was about, okay? And then any logistical questions about the application process or the internship itself, right? And so one of the things that you will want to make sure you ask, and just like in applying for an industry internship, you're going to want to know where it's going to be hosted, right? Some of these sites are going to be in multiple locations, like you're going to spend some time in one location and you'll go to another one. Others will, be in places that you wouldn't think, you would be going. I think there was one year where I worked with a center who was recruiting students to go work in the polar caps, right? And so part of their training to do that was they needed to go through polar bear training. Okay, so what is the application process and deadlines? Generally speaking, they're all going to have an application form. It's usually online. Sometimes they're not. And, the danger when they're not is, you got to make sure that you're able to submit it both in time and that it actually successfully gets to whoever it is that you need it to get to, okay? Generally speaking, they ask for a resume, a statement of purpose or an essay, letters of recommendation, and generally I've seen it be between 1 and 3, I should say between 0 and 3 letters of recommendation, and then your transcripts, okay? Your application deadlines for these programs are going to vary from site to site. Every site will have its own application process and deadline, and the deadlines start now in January and run through March, okay? Now, keep in mind that just like anything else, there's going to be a first round of offers, and then, they're going to have to wait to see, who accepts that first round of offers, and then they'll go to a second round of offers and third. And so the whole process can take quite a while. And even for myself, when I was running these programs, there were times that I was making offers in May, okay? And so, the bulk of things are going to be between January and March, but it isn't to say that there's going to be no opportunity after March, okay? So it gives you an idea of the timeline with this. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about how I utilize the application materials, and they might help you to think about how you might package your application to be more competitive. But before I do that, I just want to check in with Will if he has anything to add. I should have said this at the start for you to interject at any time, but is there anything that you want to add or correct me on?
No. Yeah, thanks, Wes, for the opportunity to chime in. No, everything is right on point. I agree with everything you've said so far. I have nothing to add. So, great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And I will unmute and interject if I want to add something. Thanks.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks for the
All
invitation.
right. Okay, so like I've always found that students find this helpful, and so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I use these application materials. And Will has more current experience with this, and so again, yeah, don't hesitate to chime in. So with the transcripts, obviously the first thing I'm looking for is where you went to school, right? Because I know that there is a little bit of a difference between someplace like UCLA engineering. Or the MITs of the world, and I'll use my school as an example, right? University of Northern Colorado. It's not an R1 institution, right? And so, where you go to school does make a difference, okay? I look at what year you're in, the courses that you've taken, and the grades that you've received. And that kind of helps me to understand the skills that you have, right? I'm looking for upward momentum. And so ideally, grades, if they're high, are being maintained, or grades are improving. As you move on through your undergraduate program. I'm also looking for gaps, repeated courses, timing, like did you take breaks? I look at whether or not each of the terms that you that they're challenging. I also look for pass no pass grades and W's, and I know pass no passes are going to be much more plentiful. With regard to remote learning over the last year, and so I can't really tell you how people are going to interpret pass no pass grades, but I can say that they will be looking at the grades where you do have a recorded grade for, and they will be looking at your other application materials. And generally speaking, again, looking at the transcript is really to understand sort of the skills that you have, right? And so like, for an electrical engineer, I might be interested to see if you took, your controls class, I might be interested to see what coding languages that you've taken if you're a CS major, but I'm looking to see, what specific classes that you had, okay? I'm also looking at how successful you are in accomplishing your goals. And so hopefully, as a successful student, one of your goals is to try to get as high grades as you can, right? And so I want to see how successful you are in doing that. And then, one of the things that I don't know that's commonly talked about is that when I look at application materials, I'm always trying to understand where your weaknesses are, right? What is the thing that you're going to struggle with, right? Because, when it comes down to it, and this is sort of a general standpoint that I have in looking at applications, is that none of you are engineers yet, right? You're budding engineers, you're apprentices. Anyway, you get what I mean. And I know for every student that there's going to be areas that we're going to need to provide some additional support on, right? And it could be, there's a lot of different sort of categories of weaknesses, right? It could be stuff in your classes, right? It could be stuff from like your soft skills, right? Like, I've had a number of students who, speak English as a second language or have a really hard time vocalizing their opinion. And those things matter too, right? And so when I look at materials, I am looking to see that as a lab manager, I'm not a lab manager, for my lab managers or myself as a program manager, what are the things that I'm going to need to provide some additional support to you if we were to make you an offer, okay? So ordering transcripts is a really important thing because they can take a lot of time, right? And particularly if you're relying on mailed transcripts, there's the processing time, there's the time that it has to take to go through the mailroom, then there's the postal service, and then there's a mailroom at the receiving institution, right? Before it gets to, the program manager or the faculty who's going to be collecting your materials and reviewing that. So ordering your official transcripts, if it's required, is something that is time sensitive and you would want to get on right away. Okay. One of the things that I'll say is, if there's something that you really want, you got to go after it. And even if they say, the hard deadline is, 5 p.m. today, if you really want to apply for it and you don't think it's going to get there, you need to send an email and saying, hey, I don't think that my official transcript is going to get there in time. Is there anything that I can do? And better yet, if you can offer a solution, and so like you can say things, would you accept my unofficial transcripts in lieu of the official one so that you can review the application, right? Not every program manager is going to do this, but like I've definitely given students the benefit of the doubt, and particularly knowing that sometimes it takes a long time for mail to get through our mailroom, and I've said, don't worry about it, just send me the unofficial copies, okay? So one of the tactics that I would advocate, pursuing, if you find yourself in that position. Okay. Resume is kind of important because, this is a little bit more of an illustration of who you are and what your experiences are. So again, school year, major, I look at citizenship only because, as I mentioned, these programs are specifically for US citizens and permanent residents, okay? And then, that information is usually a question that they ask on the online application. If they don't, one of the things that I do recommend is, and I hate doing this because it isn't right, but if you have a name that doesn't look, that looks foreign, you might want to indicate that you are a US citizen on your resume so that, you remove the risk of you not being reviewed because they think you're an international student. I hope that makes sense. Again, I don't think it's right. But, in a world where some of these sites are going to be reviewing hundreds of applications, we want to make sure we're increasing the potential of you getting reviewed, okay? I like to see a skill section, and because it's kind of like, I want to see what you're claiming that you have. And then when I see your skills section, this is immediately what I think, right? What are these skills are things that you learned in class versus skills that you actually use on a project, right? Because use on a project will tell me, really what the level of your proficiency is. There's something to measure that. And secondly, that you've applied it to something, right? It wasn't just theoretical or conceptual. You actually used it to solve something, okay? Now, the next thing that I'm looking for, this is the most important, and I think, we're getting to a place where I think this is very common knowledge. The most important thing for me to know about is your technical experience, okay? And so, probably the best technical experience you could list would be previous research experience, but most of us don't have that, right? Work experience, particularly if the work is engineering or technical in nature, we want to see that, right? Student design team experience or any technical experience that you've done at home or a class project can also be included in your technical experience, right? If it is a coding language, if you use a particular process, if you use a specific program to CAD something, that's some technical experience that you can list on this. And particularly if there was a design, build, test, iterate, right, component to it, that involves sort of measurable metrics, right? In the variables that you tweaked in that iteration, that's definitely technical experience, okay? And so it can be listed there. And that just helps me, kind of jumping ahead, but this helps me how what your experiences are will translate or could translate to the work that we're doing and what we need, right? Okay, so kind of going back to the bullets here, the next thing is work experience if it's not engineering. And there is a value in listing work experience, even if it's, working part-time at McDonald's. It helps me to know that you know what it means to be an employee, you had a supervisor, you had deliverables that you needed to achieve. And then certainly there's someone that I can call to get a perspective on your workability, okay? One thing I want to backtrack to, technical experience. The work experience, can also include things like, if it was technical in nature, mechanical in nature, you can list them here, right? And so I've had experiences before where, like a student who is interested in going to work at Boeing over the summer didn't realize that, working 4 years in his uncle's auto body shop was something relevant that he should have listed, right? He had experience with repairs, he had experience with fabricating, parts and stuff like that. And, that's that kind of stuff, we look for as well. Example. So one of the REUs that I ran a number of years ago was looking at environmental monitoring, right? And so, we're looking for particularly students with CS, EE, and MECI experiences to come and work with us. But, one of the things that these students did was we put them out into an estuary and they had to dig holes to be able to install, our sensor network, right? And so we needed people who also had this like experience working with tools, right? And out in the physical world, right? Not just sitting at a computer in front of your desk. And, it's helpful to have some people who are savvy with those kinds of skills, right? To make sure that we can get the work done. So, some of those things are a little bit of a tangent to, what you might expect that people are looking for. But you got to think a little bit outside of the box, right? With regard to, your experiences and how they might be relevant. Okay. Interest, involvements, and awards, are important. And then I also look at your dates, right? To see, when you did these things, how many things you're sort of balancing at one time, right? Again, it helps me to identify some of your weaknesses, particularly if you're listing a whole bunch of skills that you don't have any practical experience demonstrating use of those skills. It also helps me to understand your ambition and how well-rounded you are, okay? Statement of purpose. This is probably the most important thing, right? Because this is your opportunity to really help people to understand who you are, what your abilities are, and why you want to participate, okay?
Hey, Wes, sorry to interrupt. There was a question came up from the previous slide. Can you speak to the difference, if it's okay to submit CVs instead or in replacement of a resume, given that, resume is limited to 1 page and a CV can be multiple pages long?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that is going to be twofold, right? First of all, you want to make this easy for a person to read. And if you're providing them with too much content, it's a little bit of overload. And so I'd be very careful about, providing them lengthy documents, and particularly when things become redundant or not really relevant, okay? The second thing, and actually it's a thing that I need to add on this slide, is if you have any publications or presentations, which I think is really one of the big values of having a CV, you should be listing that on your resume, okay? And so I'm gonna put that here, publications and presentations. I should say academic presentations, okay? And so, you have to use your judgment a little bit. Like if I were to say what would be best is to provide them with a 1-page resume that includes your publications and academic presentations. Maybe you can have a website with your projects and stuff like that, so they can click a link if they're interested in learning more. But, I think one of the things that you could do is you could bring your CV in to us and we can take a look and try to help you to figure out what's going to be the best thing for you. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Wes.
Okay, so going back to the statement of purpose, there's a few things that I want to point out that's important about the statement of purpose. And the reason I'm not going into more specifics is because every site might have a different prompt that they want you to respond to, okay? But again, a faculty reading your essay is going to be looking to see how you might contribute, right? And if we have the resources to support the scaffolding that's going to be necessary to ramp you up so that you can contribute to the lab, okay? And so that being said, first and foremost, you got to do your homework to understand what you're applying to, right? those students who wanted to go to med school applying to the Wireless Health Institute immediately got put into the no stack, right? Another common thing is that, students have applied for a research spot looking at really outdated research, right? And so, they may have looked at a website that had information that wasn't updated. And I know that was probably my fault as a program manager, but they didn't follow up with an email to us to inquire. And so they didn't know that, they were, applying to a program that was doing something very different than what they were writing about in their statement of purpose. Okay, and you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot with that. So do your due diligence of really understanding what it is that you're applying to. Very, very important. Okay. The second thing is we want to know about your technical experience, right? That is the most important thing, right? And so if you have a technical project or activity, again, the overview of the project, you're part of that, right? And be specific. Add in the coding languages or the processes or equipment, names of equipment that you worked with, particularly if it's a skill or a relatable skill, to what they're looking for, right? You want to talk about the outcome of your work or what the next step is. That's very research sort of mindset, right? Research is never done. It's about doing iterations and knowing what to move on to next, right? And you kind of want to conclude with how that work has led you to understanding your interests, and hopefully that interest is aligned with what the program you're applying to is doing. Okay, and so we like to see that you're not just going after anything, that you're being a little bit concerted about reflecting on your experiences and knowing what it is that you're interested in, what resonates with you. And if what we're doing is that, then, your motivation is in the right place, okay? So, definitely talk about your technical experience, and remember again that these can be projects that you do in class. It can be do it yourself at home projects, stuff you do with the student design orgs. It can be work experience, right? If it's technical or mechanical in nature. And then I wanted to point this out, right? Tutoring is not a technical experience, okay? There is a value in talking about that, right? And particularly with regard to being able to understand concepts and to translate ideas so other people can understand it. It tells a little bit about you as a person and wanting to give back. It tells a little bit about you as a person with a motivation to try to get as many different kinds of experiences in STEM as possible. And so it's definitely good, but it is not technical experience. It's definitely tier 2, okay? And so the reason why I mentioned this is you really need to dig deep in thinking about what your technical project experience is, because you want to say something, right? And so think about the labs that you've had in classes, think about the projects that you've done, right? That you might be able to list as a technical experience, okay? And then you also want to say why you want to participate, right? Like, what is this experience going to do for you and what you're hoping to get out of it, okay? And so with the statement of purpose, I think I've read a lot of statements that started off with things like, I discovered that I was interested in engineering, as a grade school student. One winter day I was sitting on a park bench with my grandfather who was an engineer. Like, not relevant at all, right? I need to know about your engineering mind and your experience that you have, okay? And so talking about your technical project experience is the way that you're going to do it, okay? All right. So the next thing that I want to talk about is, and by the way, we have drop-in counseling that's available to help you brainstorm, right, what you should include in your statement of purpose. And so if you want help with that, you can come to the Engineering Transfer Center. And I think Will also has drop-in hours with with the undergraduate research program. Is that correct, Will?
Yes, actually a question came up in the chat earlier, which I answered in the chat, but it's right. It's a perfect tee here, teeing it up here. The question was, can we have our resumes reviewed by someone with experience in REU programs? And I responded to that question by putting a link to our peer advising flyers. So we do have 5 undergraduate research program peer advisors who have all been trained to do exactly that. And they actually offer, I think it's almost 20 hours a week of peer advising drop-in hours. So I put the flyer, a link to the flyer in the chat, so you can click on that. You can either make an appointment, or you can just scan the QR code for the Zoom link for the drop-ins, where you just show up. Kind of like if we had an office, if it wasn't the pandemic,
Yep.
we'd have an office. You could just walk into the office and say, hey, I'd like somebody to review my resume. So definitely available. Thanks.
So and then also for all transfer students, and really all students in general, if you guys want, need this help, we're available to you. But specifically for transfer students, we're going to be continuing our drop-in advising from 12 to 2, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week, specifically for this. And then there's also the e-transfer hangouts, for you to come to and get some guidance. Particularly, we're prepared to help our transfer students to think about their experiences and how they might make themselves marketable for these things. Okay. So the next slide here, who should apply? Really, everyone should apply, particularly if you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. If it is an Nsf Reu, if you're not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, you will be ineligible for that. I'm sorry, but I look at this as just another opportunity for you guys to get to know engineering, right? Go and sample the buffet line, figure out what it is that you like, right? Get a feel for what graduate school is going to be like, and try to figure out if that's something that you want to do or not, right? But certainly everyone can use this as a stepping stone. There probably isn't a better technical experience that you can have than doing research that will help provide you with some really awesome nuggets of things that you can share with a recruiter, in anything that you decide to pursue in engineering. Okay, so these are great stepping stone experiences, and they again are provided to our younger students. We're encouraged to provide opportunities to our first and second year students, as well as those students who are approaching graduation. Okay, so for those of you who are younger, this might be a really great stepping stone, to help you land that industry internship, if that's that's where you're hoping to go. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to cover before we move over to the panelists is we do have a couple of REU sites here at UCLA Engineering, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Will to talk a little bit about this.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Wes. So we do have 2 REU programs that we're hosting as part of our summer undergraduate research program. This is the flyer, which you can find on our URP website. Andrea, I see that you're on already in the Zoom room. Do you mind posting the website link to our undergraduate research program website, please? And so, there are, I won't go over too many of the details here because the CERT benefits are very similar to what Wes has already mentioned with other REUs, in that they're very structured programs. They provide a lot of scaffolding support. It's intended for less experienced undergraduate research students. So you're not expected to have any prior knowledge, and so there's a lot of scaffolding and training that happens. So you can see some of the CERT benefits there on the left side of the slide. Our program is running June 21st through August 13th of this summer. And there are 2 REUs, and you can see that on the backside, on the blue side of the flyer on the right side. There's the Functional Nanomaterials REU, which is hosted by Professor Chi-Wei Wang in the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department. And then there's the Interactive Systems REU, which is hosted by Professor Greg Potty in the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department also. So both are kind of more EECS related REUs. So that application is now open. So there's a link on the flyer, and I'll put in the chat, we'll put a link to the flyer also, so that you can apply. So yeah, that's our summer undergraduate research program. and specifically the two REUs that we're hosting for this coming summer. Like Wes mentioned, some of the application requirements are here. 3.0 GPA, U.S. citizen, a lot of the same things that Wes has mentioned earlier in the presentation. So I don't want to take up too much of the time. I know we have panelists here, and I'm sure you want to hear from like a student perspective on what these REU experiences are. So I'm going to stop here, and if there are any questions, you can unmute your mic or type them into the chat now.
Okay, while we're doing that, shoot, can you still see my screen? Okay. Okay, so before we go into the panel, I just wanted to talk about next steps. And so if you're interested in applying for one of these, you want to investigate and identify 3 to 5 RU sites for you to apply to. Start collecting important information and put it in one place. Just like when you did those college apps, right? Like it can be a mad mess if you've got things all over the place. Know your deadlines, right? And what the application processes and materials that you need to turn in for each site. And, like an annotated bibliography, kind of like talk about or think about like why it is that you're, put some notes down on why it is that you're interested, in the program and what you think, they're looking for, right? And then start to work on your application materials. Think about who you might be asking for a letter of recommendation and drop that email. And then come to the Engineering Transfer Center or the Undergraduate Research Program for assistance, okay? I think I'm going to skip over this and what to expect over the summer, and we're going to go to our speaker panel. Give me 1 second because I need to pull up my. All right, so we have 3 panelists here today, Andrea, Emily, and Michael. And in just a second, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to all of you. But I really do hope that our attendees, will ask some questions to our panelists and, really make this a meaningful experience for all of you. And there are 3 people here, one of which is one of the student workers for the undergraduate research program. And then Emily and Michael are actually now in doctoral programs or graduate programs. They were participants in REU with the UCLA Town Center. And so, well, I wonder, should we continue recording the panel, or should we have them introduce themselves and stop? What do you think?
Totally up to you, Wes. I think I think that whoever is going to watch the video at a later time would benefit from listening to the panel, but totally your decision.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and continue recording. And so if I can ask Andrea and Emily and Michael to introduce yourselves, and then I'll talk a little bit about how the panel is going to work. So Andrea, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So my name's Andrea Ramirez, and I'm a 4th-year mechanical engineering major. And as he had mentioned, I'm currently one of the undergraduate research programs, one of the peer advisors. So I work for Will. That's why I was putting the links in the chat below. And I participated in an RU program at Northwestern University. My project title was Observation of Thermal Transport Across MOS2 and Graphene 2D Interfaces. So it was a really great experience, really great summer.
Thank you, Andrea. Emily, would you like to follow?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Emily Burnside. I'm in my 2nd year of my PhD program in the mechanical engineering department. I participated in an REU the summer of 2017, so a little while ago, but I was with the TAMS ERC here at UCLA, and they're the group that I'm actually working with now. So my project was contributing to basically a cell sorting project using magnetism. And it was a really great experience. And I applied because I wanted some sort of experience outside of working as an engineering intern. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed my time.
Thank you, Emily. Michael, would you like to follow?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Michael Guevara Jesus. I'm in my fourth year of my PhD program. I've been under the advisorship of Professor Lynch and Greg Carmen. Before joining grad school during my undergraduate years, I did several RUs and internships. Among some of them, two of those internships are used with the TAMS program, and those were the program that actually got me into graduate school. And currently, I've been working with on the same project with Emily. We're developing medical devices, and it's just like we're always like looking like bringing in new students into our research center.
And are you currently on campus, or is that a virtual background?
Oh, no, this is my lab. It's that messy.
It's cool to see our workplace that we don't get to go to. Okay, so I've actually provided the panelists with a whole bunch of questions that they can respond to, and things like, why is it that you decided to apply for academic research? What was it like? How does summer academic research compare to doing work at, at an internship with industry? What were some of the challenges? I also talked about asked them to sort of reflect on what the experience did for them. And so I've kind of given you guys a little bit of an idea of things that they're prepared to talk about, but I also want to make this meaningful for all of our attendees. And so what I think I'd like to do, if the panel is okay with this, is I'm going to open it up for questions from our attendees. And if there are none, then maybe we'll work our way through the list of prepared questions. Okay, so I think at this point, what I'm going to ask is if you guys can either unmute or you can put your questions in the chat.
Hi, yeah, I had a quick question, just for anyone. So Wes talked a little bit about narrowing down to 3 to 5 programs to apply to. Obviously, to give a great application to a specific program, takes us a little bit of time to formulate that application. So I was just wondering if you guys have, from your experience, if you have any tips for finding, narrowing it down. And then also I don't know, I guess your success rate of actually getting opportunities.
That's a really good question. I actually only applied to one RU, the TAMS one, so I don't think I should be answering this, but that was a good question.
Same as her. The first one I did in summer 2019, that was the only one that I had applied to, so I got pretty lucky. So I don't have.
Actually, my very first RU was with TAMS, but I remember applying to so many internships at the time, and I think TAMS was the only one that said yes. And after that, I just went with it. But your question involved narrowing it down. Are you referring if the program is pursuing something of your interest?
Yeah, I guess just because there's a lot of different opportunities, and to put forth a good application, I feel it has to be pretty specific, and you have to spend a good amount of time. So yeah, just making sure that you get the ones that you do apply to are quality programs, and that you put forth a quality application.
I mean, in terms of quality program, if you see that the RU is funded by the NSF, that's a plus. And then in terms specification, I would say it depends what field are you interested on. For example, if you're someone who is into fluid mechanics, I don't know if TAMS will be your fit. But if you're a person that you're into semiconductors magnetics, like solid state physics, then you'll definitely like this program. So it depends like what are your interests on. And if you go to the RU program, they all have a description of what they're researching on. And you can also tell by their faculty members, like all faculty members have like the description of what they specialize on their website. So you can also like reach out like through the people in charge like of the RU or the faculty that are also members, like collaborators with the RU associated.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, it's a little bit of extra time spent, but I know when I was applying to graduate school, I looked at, you know, different professors that I was interested in, and then I looked at their Google Scholar page and just kind of skimmed through some of their papers to try and get an understanding of like the type of work that they did. And if you have a lot of time on your hands, I guess you could always like look at their collaborators, like Michael was saying, look at some of the students who have been in their labs. But I know that was helpful for me when I was applying to graduate school.
I'll just say this real quick also. It also depends on the program for the school, because not all of them are compatible with our quarter system. So you might, depending on, I don't know if it's gonna be in person, but depending on your schedule, if you can only for sure do like summers that work with our quarter system, it already kind of narrows it down for you a little bit. But as they said, like check out the programs that they offer. A lot of them offer like past research projects they have done. And if there's anything that kind of sticks out to you more, like maybe just go for those.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I also like to add on something more to that. So like before coming to grad school, I also did like other internships and RU, but regarding your question, like what will be something that like kind of like narrowing it down and something that matched your interest, you really don't know what thing you might be interested in until you actually get some experience on it. Like for example, like everyone, if you're an engineer, most during undergrads, one place that everyone tells you want to work in is NASA. So I got the chance to do an internship for a year long at NASA. But the research that I was doing there, not that it was interesting, but it just wasn't my particular, it wasn't particularly interesting to me. So, but you only get that type of perspective by, just going there and just going through the experience of the internship.
Yeah, I think that's a really good bit of advice, because I think about, in the years that I've recruited students, there's so much that goes on between the time you apply and then the work that you actually do. And I feel like sort of the level of understanding that the student has is very little before they actually get there and put their hands to the work that they have to do, right? And so, really these opportunities, yes, you want to be able to demonstrate your technical experience and show an interest in what it is that you're doing, but also realize that, the point of going to do this academic research, the reason why NSF is funding these kinds of opportunities is to help you get an exposure, of the kind of research that the lab that you're joining is doing, right? And in that sense, then helping you to figure out what resonates with you so you can get more of that, right? And I think, Michael, you actually had a couple of REUs at different sites, right? And over time, you're able to hone even more the sort of areas that you're interested in.
Yeah. Like when I was in my early years during my undergrad, there was tons of things that I would like to work on. And by the end of my undergrad, I knew a lot of things that I didn't want to work on and what I really like. So you only get that experience through, you only get that knowledge through experience. So the more internship and RU you can do during your undergrad, the better.
I just want to echo what both Michael and Wes are saying in that it really is almost like it's hard because there's such a wide range of, there's so many options out there. It is really truly a process of elimination, and you just have to try things and put yourself out there. And then, once you do it, you realize, oh, I love this. Or you might realize, you know what, this is cool, but I don't love it. I want to try something else. And so you just kind of keep trying things, right? And so don't be, I guess, to answer the original question, I would say don't be too picky. Find something that sounds cool to you, something that like, oh, I want to try that. That sounds all right. That sounds cool, and apply. And I know that Emily and Andrea applied to just one, and they were lucky that they got into the one they applied to, and that's awesome. But my recommendation would be to apply at least to maybe 2, 3, maybe 4. And I know sometimes bandwidth is an issue and you don't have time, like you said, I think that was your question, was, I don't have time to apply to 10 REUs. So let me just pick my top 3 or 4 choices and go with that and put together the best application you can. So.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. That was really good advice.
Any other questions?
I had a question about the transcript. So I applied to the Caltech research into technically through their WAVE program. Now they asked for, it was the unofficial transcript at first, and then they said that if they accept you, then they'll take the official transcript. So I ended up dropping one of the classes because I was taking 4 classes this quarter, and then I ended up dropping one of them. I don't know if that would be a big issue because it's not like major required classes or even a recommended class. It was one of the special courses, the 188 courses that's kind of just taken for fun or out of interest. I don't know if that would be an issue.
You dropped out. I didn't get to hear your explanation. Will, did you hear what he said? That could you respond to him, or can I ask?
In terms of coursework, like I can tell you for experience, like we just select a few group of students that will be working with us during the coming quarters, and none of them has like the course requirement to do our research.
Okay.
It's like a lot of the time, like you just have during research, you have to learn things on the fly.
Maybe that's actually a good question to ask at this point. Is what was it like joining the lab, right? Did you need to come with a certain skill set, or was there some work you needed to do at the start to be able to ramp up? Like, what was your experience joining your lab?
For the summer program that I did, it officially started a week before we left, or like before we had to fly out to like the school on campus, Northwestern, and it was more like preparatory work, because honestly I had no idea like what the project really was. I read through it and they gave me like the outline, and they matched me with my professor and stuff to work for the summer. So a lot of it was just reading articles that were related to that work, especially the articles from the lab that I was assigned. And in terms of technical work, I didn't have preparatory work, but they had expectations for you. They kind of outlined, like the requirements was to know MATLAB, because I did end up using MATLAB over the summer. So I would say if you want to prepare yourself, for an upcoming, even if you're just applying, try to work on like programming skills or, like technical skills if you're not like super comfortable with them, just to be like more secure about them. Because I feel like they do come up, they kind of expect you to at least know the basics for it so you can aid them.
Yeah, I agree with what Andrea was saying, especially about MATLAB. It's a very helpful thing to know. I don't know that when I was coming into my REU experience, I didn't know a lot of the background stuff, because what TAMS does is specifically magnetics, which you just don't normally see a lot of in your like introductory kind of undergrad science classes. I think what's really important is just knowing your learning style and knowing how to pick things up quickly, how to understand different concepts. Overall, my REU experience was really positive, where when there were things we didn't know how to do, the older students in the lab or the professor that I worked with, they were all very willing to walk you through whatever you were having trouble with. So, you know, it's really good to pick up these different skills and everything, but I also wouldn't sweat it too much, because once you get there, if you need help, there are resources.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about prior knowledge. Like one of the goals of this RU is like they're designed to be an educational program. So yeah, like I said, like you kind of just learn on the go. So, and if you don't have like any background knowledge, like whatever that's coding or modeling, we never assign something too complicated to the undergrad. At least I wouldn't assign something to my undergrad that I myself cannot do. So we always try to keep the workload as simple.
Other questions? I have more, but are there other?
Are any of the REU programs that you guys been a part of the kind where there isn't like a common application, like there's not like a SURF program or something? It's more of just you contact the individual faculty member, and maybe on their website or their lab website, it'll say, oh, we're looking for undergraduate students to apply to our lab or something, in any kind of situations like that? And any recommendations on how to go about applying to those?
So the TAMS REU, it's kind of centralized for that center, where you basically put in your information, fill out your application, and then they assign you to a professor. I guess my only somewhat similar experience would be applying to grad school. I think, like I said earlier, it can be really helpful to go through that professor's Google Scholar and read about their work and kind of get on this level where you can speak a similar language. I don't know if that's super helpful, but.
Yeah, you know, I think like, so I've worked with some of these sites. I've never attended any RU, but I've worked with a couple of these sites where like the faculty is the one running the program, and you know, like it's definitely a lot less structured, right? You're going to hear about it because, you know, one of the faculty's colleagues is you know, sharing with their students about, you know, their colleague recruiting for summer internship spots. You know, which isn't to say that like, you know, you can't apply for them, right? And so all of these NSF RU sites, we're encouraged to take, which is one of the things we, I don't know that we mentioned, but we're encouraged to only take 40% of our participants from our home institution. The other 60% should be from an institution outside, right? And so, you know, for that faculty, you know, they're also going to be looking to recruit some students from outside, but they may not have the bandwidth to go and, you know, create a flyer and a website and do the marketing, right? Like I've had, you know, there was this one site where the faculty was the one driving to the airport to pick up the intern when they arrived.
Oh my God, that has never happened to me, but wow, that is hands-on right there. Awesome.
And you know, and I think what Will is saying is actually, you know, one of the values of having that kind of experience. You know, I think like, you know, with a site like UCLA, we have awesome people like Will, who's really going to, you know, make sure that, you know, the program is very well run and the students' needs are being addressed, and holistically, you know, you're getting a good experience, right? With a program like the one that you're talking about, the advantage to it is, dude, you are getting some very like one-on-one attention, right? You're building a relationship with a very small community of people that are probably going to be, you know, a lot tighter, a lot more involved with each other, right? And just like in similar ways that, you know, you can, some of the values of like, you know, working for a startup at the beginning, right? You get to be a little bit more involved in all of the moving parts, right? And so there's a value in that. And I think, you know, what Emily says with regard to, you know, striking up a conversation with the faculty, you still have to do the same due diligence, right? Know what it is that you're applying to, show some general interest. You know, you in your email, you just might say, hey, you know, I saw, you know, your program site information on the NSF RU site, and I'm really interested to learn more about what you're doing, right? And then hopefully they'll respond, okay? But yeah, those do exist, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? This is great, you guys.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go again. So my last question, or at least the question I'm thinking of right now is, okay, so my situation is I don't have previous research experience, and I haven't had, as a new transfer, I haven't had any internships yet. So what do you recommend, kind of like how would I formulate my resume and my application to be the best applicant for that? Because I do have, in my favor, I do have strong letters of recommendation and a strong GPA, but I'm lacking in the research experience area.
I'm going to let our panelists see if they want to respond to this, because they might have a different answer than what I'll say.
I can answer real quick. I don't see it as a huge problem, given that, you do have your strengths. And I feel like, I mean, I didn't really have like a strong internship background either. Like I just worked like at a small firm back home, but it wasn't very technical heavy. So I was kind of in the same boat. Like I didn't really have a lot of like technical experience behind me, but I at least had good grades and stuff. And I feel like that kind of helps balance it out. I would say if you do like for sure have interest, or at least like you want to work on your skills, like anything like that helps to just show, like you're trying to put your skills out, or you're trying to practice your skills, And I would say if you're not involved, do get involved in any clubs on campus. I know right now it's kind of hard because it's virtual, but a lot of clubs are still offering even like some little projects that they do like virtually and stuff. If that's something that you would want to look into to kind of make yourself a little bit more well-rounded and just like kind of pursue your interests in that way. But I would say I feel like a lot of these programs, like the people that I met, like that I knew during the summer, it was like the very first research experience. So it wasn't like we were all like professionals, like we kind of just started out. And for many of us, it was our very first experience, like being in a program like that. So it's kind of, it really helps. Like these programs are supposed to be designed to kind of introduce students to that, to that whole research experience. So I don't think like you should count yourself out. I think just maybe work on strengthening like what you do have, and maybe trying to like reach out a little bit more just to make sure like you seem a little bit more well-rounded. But I would say you seem pretty good.
I agree with what she was saying, especially in terms of clubs. The undergrad institution I went to was very, very hands-on, which I'm really grateful for. So there are a lot of opportunities to beef up your resume with clubs. So I would 100% try and build your skill set that way. But also definitely don't be down on yourself if you haven't had that internship experience yet or that research experience yet, because like everybody has to start somewhere. And so I think definitely remind yourself that you have a lot of strengths and a lot of things going for you, and keep that in mind while you build your resume.
Okay, I'll say like, for example, a lot of these RU programs, they're trying to promote graduate studies. So I don't know what are your long-term goals, is either go to the master or the PhD, but you can always say that you want to go all the way to the PhD. And that will give you like, it's not a requirement, but it will give you maybe a slight edge.
Yeah, that's usually what I say. Because right now I'm really heavily considering a PhD, but usually I make it sound like I'm certain I want to go to a PhD.
Yeah, I mean, this is off the record kind of thing, but, I mean, it's not off the record. You can always change your mind. You can always pivot a different direction, right? And there are particularly some engineering disciplines where, that might play even more role, right? I know like, particularly with civil engineering, it's hard to find grad students who want to earn their doctorate instead of just their master's. So, that is, that is a good thing to mention. I think I'm glad that, the panelists provided their feedback, because it is important for me to mention that, the things that I shared in my presentation, that's really focused at like, sort of striving for the best application, right? These are scaffolding programs. I definitely agree with everything that everyone said here with regard to that. And I think a couple of things, like Jonathan, maybe it would be helpful for you to come to one of our drop-ins because we can kind of talk about some of what your experiences are to think about, I want to say that 9 out of 10 times I'm able to find some technical experience that you've had that we can sort of highlight in your applications. And so, I'd certainly encourage you to come and drop in and let's talk. The other thing is, I'll tell you some just experiences I've had, like we've made offers to students, based on the fact that they had one coding class, right? Which everybody here I think has. And so, some of it, again, we understand that you're not an engineer yet, right? And when I talk about like trying to identify some of the areas that we need to provide some scaffolding in, and so like in this particular case, it's like, okay, the student needed to at least know coding. And, if it's okay if it's not in the language that we need it in, because, we know that once you know how to code, you understand the logic behind that. And we can stick you in a room for a week, to learn a different coding language. Emily talked about the importance of MATLAB, and there was one year where it was like, okay, everybody had to know MATLAB. And so for 1 week, that's all we did, right? We did a crash course on MATLAB. And so in that case, like having a bit of coding experience was important to be able to transfer that, to take some transferable skill to be able to learn, whatever it is that we needed them to learn, right? And so the short of the long of what I'm saying is that you never know, what the application pool is going to look like, what other people have, right? And then, what the lab is willing and able to provide support with, right? And so, with that in mind, it's like, I think, everyone should be applying if you have an interest in doing it.
Can I add something, Wes?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's a great question. And I want to remind jokingly, we are recording, so I don't want to have to edit things out of the video. So I will say this, that like Michael mentioned, many of these programs are kind of pipeline programs to graduate school. So I would never, ever, ever tell anyone to lie and pretend as if you're interested in a PhD or you're certain that you want to go to a PhD. However, if you are genuinely interested in exploring graduate school, that's all that you need to say, right? Is that, look, I've thought about a master's, I've thought about a PhD. I don't know, I have no idea if I want to do it yet, but I want to do this program so that I can find out and I can decide later, right? And so that's what you all really, if you genuinely are interested in exploring graduate school, that's what I would recommend you say. You don't want to make definitive statements like, for sure, I'm getting a PhD no matter what happens. You just want to say that you're interested in exploring the idea. And I think that will be enticing enough for these REU programs to say, ooh, that's the kid we want to accept.
So we're coming on 6 o'clock here, and I don't want to keep you guys beyond what you committed to. But maybe if the panelists could share a little bit about like what you feel you gained from doing the research, and like how did it impact your pathways after doing the research?
It was definitely pretty eye-opening for me, I guess, especially because I did have a close professional relationship with my professor, my PI, and to this day, he's been very supportive and gives me recommendation letters if I ask him. So that's a plus. But I would say the big thing is kind of just being exposed to advanced academic setting. I found it very intimidating at first, and I did have a hard time, especially learning the basics of what I was learning in the lab. And even just using MATLAB for the technical aspect of it, as a project setting. So it's really great to expose you to that and kind of get you over that fear or like that intimidation. And it really, I feel like for me, it definitely exposed me to like what a graduate school setting would be, or at least like just what a higher academic level of like engineering and, you know, being in touch with a professor kind of thing that would be. So I think I would say it's definitely guided me towards that. So for now, like now I'm in the process, and I have applied to a few like master's programs, and I'm still in the process of applying to a few more. So it helped me like open my eye to that.
So what I got out of the RU program, it kind of actually changed what I wanted for my future. Originally, I thought I wanted to be an engineer in industry and focus on that. But once I got to be in academia, I realized how much I love research and the freedom that comes with that. So it really changed a lot for me. Also through my RU program, I met the professor who's now my advisor, which I feel really grateful for. He's an amazing advisor. And then also through the group that I did my RU with, I managed to get funding, which was also a huge plus. So I think overall, it was a really wonderful experience.
Well, my first RU program was like 2015. And I remember I did it with 10th over at Cornell University. And for me, that was like one of the best experiences I had until that time. Like, and when I first got there, I was like very intimidated. Like I never used console before. And I spent the entire summer like learning how to use it, and we were able to do a lot of cool stuff with it. So I think the really important thing here is just like expose yourself as much as possible. And I mean, like before that, I didn't even knew like how graduate program or research was, but like I fell in love with it after that experience.